I've referenced this video many times in previous videos, and finally we're here. And this is a video on gerunds, participles, and infinitives. What I'm going to do in this video, they're not going to test you directly on what a gerund is or what a participle is, but they are going to be parts of sentences, and often a sentence will be wrong because one of these will be misused. If you follow kind of my rubric for grammar errors, if you watch, say, the Grammar Boot or the SAT Foundation series, one of the errors I talk about is verb form. The verb form error. Verb form. And that's just shorthand for that they're misusing one of these verbals here. And to fix the sentence, we'd have to either change it into a different verbal or change the sentence in some other way. So let's talk about gerunds. Before we talk about that, let me just define this word verbal that I've used a few times. A verbal is a word that seems like a verb in the sense that they carry activity or being, but they actually aren't main verbs, right? They don't have a subject-verb relationship. That is, they can't be the components of an independent clause. They can be components of other clauses and phrases, but not of independent clauses. Actually, no, they can't be ingredients of clauses at all. They can be ingredients of phrases, so like participial phrases or gerund phrases or whatever, but they can't be clauses because they don't actually carry that subject-verb relationship. So examples would be verbs like, or verbals like to swim, walking, and erased. So we'll talk about what these are in a second, but note that these words look like verbs. In fact, to swim is the infinitive version of swim, but I can't say something like I to swim today, right? Or I can't say I walking today. That creates fragments, as we've seen in the fragment video. So let's look at the three major kinds of verbals here. We have gerunds, participles, and infinitives. Let's start with gerunds. Gerunds are the verb with an ing at the end. And when the verb is like this, it's acting as a noun. Now you're going to see below that actually the gerund is sometimes indistinguishable when you look at it from the present participle. But how it is distinguishable is how the word acts in the sentence. So if you're confused, okay, is something a gerund or is it a participle? You ask yourself, okay, what role, what function does it play in the sentence? So let me give you some examples. Swimming is really fun. Note here the subject of the sentence is this noun, swimming, which, by the way, is a gerund, right? It's the verb swim with an ing. Of course, it's not always just ing. In this case, we had to add an M onto it. But anyway, right, you've got your ing form of swim, and that becomes a noun, right? So gerunds can act as subjects. They can act as objects. So, for instance, I hate dancing. In this case, I is the subject, hate is the verb, and here is our noun, direct object of hate, which happens to be a gerund. So the ways in which nouns can be used, gerunds can be used, right? They're just noun versions. They can be put after prepositional phrases, right? We could say, let's see, I have a dislike for talking. So here, we got a few things going on, right? We got our subject is I got our verb. A dislike is the direct object. I have a dislike. For, here's our preposition, and talking, here's our gerund. Note as well, dislike for would be a verb preposition idiom, or I should say a noun preposition idiom, right? So I would have a dislike of talking maybe, or dislike for talking, whatever it is. In any event, dislike for talking is fine. And note that we have a gerund here acting as the indirect object. I have a dislike for talking. It might be dislike of, but in any event, whatever the preposition is, it's going to take this gerund as the object of that preposition. All right, so those are gerunds. I think those are pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and check out participles. So participles are verbs acting as an adjective, not as a noun, but as an adjective. And there are two forms of the participles. In the tense video, I've already kind of introduced participles a little bit. We have the present participle, which is the verb plus ing. So, for instance, swimming. And we have the past participle, which is the verb generally plus ed. Not always, but a lot of the times. So, something like talked or hated. Now notice that sometimes you're going to have irregular versions of this, right? So the past participle of swim, for instance, is swum. So sometimes you have irregular versions, and those, you either just learn from speaking, or if you're really interested, you can, find lists and tables of them. But they don't really test swum directly too often, anything like that. Really, we just want to know what a present and past participle is and how it can be used. Okay, so what are some examples of this? Well, we could have something like the talking boy is here. Here, talking, well, let's break the sentence down. The is just an article, but the talking boy, so here's the subject, talking boy. In this case, talking is an adjective. It's a present participle describing the boy. Is, here's our verb, and here is the verb complement, right? It's the thing that tells us what the talking boy is. But the noun complement, or I guess it would be, anyway, it doesn't matter, right? It tells us what the talking boy is. All right, so that would be an example. Another one would be, the hated general. The hated general. Here would be a past participle with general. One thing, so where do these go wrong sometimes on the SAT? They go wrong when they create fragments, as you might expect. So again, the trick for looking for fragments, as I mentioned in the last video, is make sure you can find that subject-verb relationship in the sentence somewhere. If you ever have you can use present participles as well, as we've seen in other videos, or past participles to start off an introductory modifier, right, to be a subordinate clause, or at least to be participial phrase, right? You can use them, maybe not as a subordinate clause, but as kind of participial phrases, or phrases to modify other things, and that's fine. You just got to make sure that it's not a fragment. You got to make sure that there is a subject-verb relationship somewhere in an independent clause. And one of the big instances that you'll see on the SAT of this happening, of these issues, is with the word being. This is the present participle of to be, but it is really very often misused on the SAT. So if you ever see this in the original question or in a choice, be very skeptical of it before you pick it. Most of the time, it's not going to be right. It's going to be wrong, either because it's going to be too wordy, or because it'll create fragments, or any other kind of error that could come through. So be very skeptical of the word being. And as I mentioned in the tenses video, you'll also see present and past participles in compound tenses. So for example, I had walked. This is the past perfect. Past perfect. If you don't remember the thing about tenses, go check out the tense video I made. So I had walked. So here is our auxiliary or helping verb, auxiliary, that goes with past perfect, and here is our past participle, past participle. I am walking. This would be present continuous or present progressive, right? Again, helping verb, auxiliary verb, and here's our present participle. So realize that actually you can kind of think of participles having three main functions, or I should say the ing versions of verbs having three main functions. One is a gerund, as we saw here, one as a present participle acting as an adjective, and one as a present participle acting as the other part of the compound tense here. Okay, so that is it for participles. Let's move on to infinitives. These don't have much of a role to play, but basically an infinitive, if you've taken a foreign language before, you've, I think, become very familiar with what an infinitive is, and it's just the root of the verb plus two. So, to swim, to eat, to think. These can act in many different ways. I'm not going to list them all out. Sometimes it's just an idiomatically. So for instance, I deserve to win, right? Deserve in this case takes to win as the object, and to win is almost like some say it's a direct object of deserve, but the point is that to win is used idiomatically. So I deserve win, no, I deserve to win, right? So some of these are idioms, and I think most English speakers, we have these down, so we don't really need to study them that much. They can also be used as nouns. So an example of that would be something like, let's see. To win the game would rule. So here, to win the game is an infinitive. Right, you got to win and then the game. It's an infinitive, but it's acting as a noun. They can act as adjectives. They can act as adverbs. I'm not going to show you examples of that. They can act in a lot of different ways. The point is that when they're being used, make sure that they're being used idiomatically, and make sure that they aren't, they shouldn't be, exchanged with a gerund or a participle or anything like that. All right, so I hope that helped. I hope this gave you at least a basic breakdown of the differences between gerunds, participles, and infinitives. So let's move on to the next video.